Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Tableau Financial Services Summer Skills Series. I am Megan Kessler, the CMO of Financial Services Americas for Tableau at Salesforce. Summer is a time to not only recharge yourself with vacation and fun, but also a time to recharge your mind. Over the next month, the Summer Skills Series will feature Tableau engineers and partners who will guide you through the most pressing needs of financial services. Be sure to check out every session on Tuesdays at 12 o'clock Eastern. Today, we kick off with moving off from legacy systems with Uday Hegde, CEO and co-founder of USEReady, and Arun Changamveetil, Vice President of Architects at Tableau at Salesforce. Uday and Arun will be covering critical reasons to migrate, including operational efficiency and cost reduction, enhanced security, improved customer service, competitive advantage, regulatory compliance, and risk management. Be sure to use the chat box to ask questions, of which we will address at the end. And a reminder, please mute yourselves. Uday, I will now hand it over to you.
Thank you, Megan. Hello, everybody. My name is Uday Hegde. I am one of the co-founders and CEO at USEReady. I'm based in Princeton, New Jersey, so it's lunchtime for all of us in the East Coast. Prior to founding USEReady, I worked for a large bank in Midtown Manhattan, and prior to that, I worked in technology firms, global technology firms. I'm glad to have Arun, who's a good friend and also is a global leader for D&A Architecture at Salesforce. Arun, welcome.
Thank you, Uday. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Arun here from the West Coast. Delighted to be here. I bring in the perspective of ROI design. How do we reimagine analytics content? By taking this lens of migration into the conversation. This is core of what we do from a D&A architecture perspective here in Tableau. So we're really excited to be here. Let's make this conversation interactive. Please add your questions in the chat here. Megan's here. She's going to moderate some of this. So let's get started.
Thank you, Arun. As we kick things off here, I'm sharing a short agenda on the screen here. We're going to talk about a little bit about USEReady and then talk about challenges in the migration. How does the decision process work in BI harmonization journey? A little bit of strategy and blueprint, which would be a nice takeaway, and share with you a success story and open up for Q&A. Also, on the right side, you find this white paper. You can find the link on that QR code. It's something, a nice read, especially if you're on the journey to retiring legacy among enterprises, among your firm. So with that, a brief introduction. USEReady is headquartered in New York City. We are a global firm with 6 offices between US, Canada, and India. A lot of our work is focused on regulated industries, that is financial services, life sciences, healthcare. We have been a recipient of Tableau Partner of the Year award 5 times in our little journey. A lot of our work is very focused in and around legacy data platforms, migrating out of legacy, optimizing cloud investments, modernizing using data, AI. We are very well versed with a lot of products that you may be using already within your organization. Along the journey, we also created several solutions with an intention to make this journey more predictable, more affordable. A lot of our solutions are geared towards migrating out of legacy, optimizing your infrastructure environment, and modernizing your data analytics platforms. A lot of our clients are regulated banks or healthcare, life science institutions. We have been privileged to work with some of the biggest in the world, and we have seen complexity and the challenges they see every day of the week. In that journey, quite often it occurs to us uh, when enterprises decide to migrate out of legacy systems, there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. We kind of decided to examine this and figure out what are the key drivers to this journey and what do we see. We started off with looking at Gartner's Magic Quadrant as sort of a baseline to this journey. It's interesting because the quadrant itself represents a good cohort of some of the best BI analytic platforms. And usually enterprises use these platforms for operational reporting, exploratory analysis, executive dashboards, embedded analytics, more recently AI-infused BI, etc. Another pattern that emerges is that a lot of the customers are looking at consolidating, standardizing, harmonizing. As you can see, a lot of silo has been created by these products that have been around. The journey tends to move from the bottom left, that is niche players, towards the leaders in the quadrant. So a lot of customers end up choosing players within the Magic Quadrant leadership. And when we examine that further, we wanted to understand this rationale and what's going on there. We organized, we requested a firm, commissioned a survey with them, Analytics India magazine. They basically conducted survey across key industries that we selected and key participants who are decision makers. And the survey theme was built around understanding the need, migration plan and decision making, approach and vendor selection, and how do they adopt the modern analytics and accounting for change. What we discovered through that process are these key elements or four factors. One on the need and urgency, very strong percentage, that is 82%, close to 81.6%, see the value in modernization, and they have budgeted for migration, quite quite a few of them within the next 12 months, which is close to 50% of that. The decision making was leaning more towards cloud, and some good healthy percent, 30%, was still looking at hybrid as a key factor. And a lot of them were thinking about, should we do both BI and data together, or should we take phased approach and whatnot. The journey was on. Everyone looked or aiming for similar benefits. If you think about improving data analytics, enhanced decision making, integration, better user experience, cost efficiency, very standardized set of benefits there. And then finally, the value was perceived through increase in adoption, self-service, productivity improvement, and also reduce annual operational cost created by the siloed environments. Specifically, in and among financial institutions, this was more driven by the need for risk and regulatory response. A lot of post-COVID environment, macro environments, even since the last financial crisis, a lot of risk and compliance awareness is there. There was legacy players have become risk to their strategy to sustain and grow. Second one is decision making. Obviously, everyone recognizes that we are not in the world where we can wait for days and weeks for a dashboard or a report to make a decision. Really taking that to the intersection of customers was key. Enhancing the decision-making capability to the front office is important. Security is paramount. Obviously, as the journey is on to cloud, a lot of legacy tools lack the security features needed, such as it could be multi-factor authentication and whatnot. And then last one is competitive advantage. The lot of traditional financial products are no longer viable. It's not possible to make money off that, and changing interest rate climate also triggered these competitive advantage questions that everyone's looking for better alpha. With that being the background, we understand sort of the key drivers to the migration. Yes, it is needed. What is the rationale? And Arun's going to walk you through some of the decision processes we have seen by interacting, interviewing, and working through companies in their journey. Arun, thank you.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Uday. So if you could go to the next slide, please. I think it's important to really do migration through the lens of, what type of ROI impact you're going to bring out of this migration. How do you pay for itself? And number two is reduce complexity. So we did some work with Gartner, with USEReady, with our customers on this space, and really created this matrix of thinking of complexity in terms of D&A complexity. So by D&A complexity, I mean formula fields, SQL attributes, parameters, DB connections, data volume. Oftentimes, dashboards are reports. It layers and layers of legacy visuals get added to these things. So how do we think about reducing this complexity? So that's number one, complexity. Number two is experience. We live in an era of AI. We live in an era of experience. So how do we reduce that experience complexity in terms of jobs to be done, decisions to be made? How long does it take for somebody to go through this dashboard to make the relevant decision that they need to make? Should we think about reimagining it? So that there's some level of some heuristics over there. So when you think about complexity versus business value of the analytics content, it forms this this four quadrants where one could plot where do we want to invest, what are the right targets that we can migrate, because these are higher in business value but lower in complexity, so it's pretty easy to migrate to the target platform. Which ones have very limited intrinsic business value as well as complexity? These are things that we just leave it alone. It will just die at some point in time. And then great targets for eliminate. Now, one thing that you'll hear Uday talk about is when we go down this path, you might wind up with at least 50 to 60% of your content eliminating them because you don't really need them, because we are migrating a lot of this, and also we're reimagining some of this. So there's two paths here. One is the path of modernization, where one can bring in a glance, investigate, action type of patterns, where you are providing the business user analytics functionality through a set of augmented tools, or the deep exploration, where somebody wants to go deeper and kind of have that drill down and make the necessary decisions based on it. So there's some heuristic here. There's a prioritization here, and it kind of showed in the bottom of the screen. How do I prioritize? How do I identify OpEx savings, for example, and business value, and then identify the analytics complexity, experience complexity, and then plot that in this matrix. So if you could go to the next one, please. So once we think about this, once we identify the complexity, then the next step is really to get into the current state architecture from a data source perspective, pipeline, warehouse, really looking at the value chain of the data. How are we getting this data into to power my industry use cases? That's one lens. Really adjusting the architecture, looking into governance, for example, looking into operating models, so that this is an opportunity to really look at your analytics value chain to make necessary adjustments in the architecture. The second part of this is the KPIs. Oftentimes, we are overwhelmed by the number of KPIs that we have in our department. So how do we really think about it in terms of our strategic goals? who is the audience, what questions are we trying to answer, and how do you want to create some discipline around nomenclature, data collection method. So there is a lens of kind of revisiting the KPIs in here. And then the other one that Uday is going to talk more about is how do you map your current analytic stack with Tableau. We have some visuals for it. So to summarize this conversation, really, think about having an assessment of your current state, not just the architecture, but in terms of business value or what you're providing to your stakeholders, and the complexity in terms of DNA and experience, and then really identify those targets for migration and modernization. Revisit the KPIs that you're serving, and then really accelerate the next steps, which is a migration step and a modernization step. Back to you there.
Thank you very much, Arun. As you went through the decision-making process, it's clear prioritizing for downsizing the existing footprint while you embark on the journey is critical. It's clearly not a simple lift and shift process, right? If you want to accomplish that, what are the strategic elements and some of the, is there any tangible blueprint that is evolved from a pattern of having done this before is what we are really looking at. We start with what are the key components in a typical BI migration, which in my opinion is actually harder, sometimes more complex than data migration. Why? Because of the components that are designed and developed quite often proprietary in nature by the BI vendors. It could be code, business logic, dashboards, reports, quite a wide variety of aspects, components within that make it a little more challenging, harder to extract information. We recommend deploying not just one lift and shift, but instead approach automation as much as possible, take an approach of a hybrid approach of conversion factory along with prompt engineering, which is another aspect to this, especially in code conversion. Something that we evolved from there is this list of habits of highly effective projects. So we thought of sharing with you for somewhat benchmark your journey. What we have noticed quite regularly or quite often, companies that try to migrate start with a small team with a little bit of a budget, maybe somewhere in remote location, very adventurous, don't necessarily understand all the components of migration and get stuck there. And it is not uncommon to see failed projects because that templatizing, thinking through what is the end game is missing. This list should help you sort of think through that, from establishing the goal, prioritization, building the teams to blueprint, success criteria, understand the costs upfront, ultimately driving the adoption. And so with that as a backdrop, we're going to examine further into that blueprint part of it. Point number 4, or habit number 4, because is that a possibility? So that was the first question. Second is, if yes, how do we go about it? What we understood when you examine popular BI platforms that is considered legacy or customers wanting to consolidate out of, it's because they've been serving a great purpose for a very long time, performing very well, battle tested, but usually siloed into some sort of data extraction layer or a reporting layer, could be regulated industry, regulatory needs, whatnot. So we evolved a framework, what we called Migrator IQ, as a holistic approach to this process. Within that Migrator IQ approach, we talk about plan, migrate, validate as a framework, accelerators, and then expertise, specific focused expertise. All of that with an intention to improve the turnaround time, efficiency, deliver predictable outcomes. The ultimate game is to approach a better transformation with a higher impact. One of such examples of platforms we are taking here is MicroStrategy in this case, right? So when you think about a platform like MicroStrategy, it has components like projects, dashboards, cubes, schedulers. You may not be using, or users and portal. You may not be using all those features, but it is very important to understand and upfront establish that. In order to achieve that is where what we call plan module comes in. Here is an opportunity to automate several steps within the discovery process where you can understand the existing landscape, establish some sort of complexity index, extract data scripts or report logic, which ultimately will help you to deduplicate or eliminate redundancy. And then second step is obviously the migration itself. Once we have a clear path forward, a plan in place, we can generate a metric store based off the metadata that is coming from a source system, and then establish the path to translation. Uh, third step is actually quite often neglected, but eventually becomes expensive because it's a validation step, especially in BI migration. Validating visual components, validating data, validating reporting layers becomes quite complex. And also, when we migrate out of legacy, a huge component of that is built around formatted reports, report bursting, and scheduling. We have developed an extension to Tableau. We call it Pixel Perfect for fulfilling those needs. Um, the nice thing about it is that your investment in data consolidation and then standardizing on Tableau platform becomes seamless because we leverage all of that exactly as it is. Ultimately, a lot of concerns teams face around lack of inventory, business impact, or use case support, error-prone manual processes, duration, feature gaps. All of that is addressed and identified by taking a framework and accelerator approach to the journey. We talked about eliminating redundancy, eliminating the footprint quite regularly, and in our previous slides also. And here is the pictorial representation of that. What do we aim for? We have codified it into 4 Rs, basically reduce, reconcile, refactor, and reimagine. Here, what we are targeting for is about 25% of your existing footprint we should be able to eliminate without having to migrate. So already you started the journey with a much lighter version of what you already have or what you have currently. We use some of the techniques in the extraction or the plan phase that we established before to identify those candidates for elimination. Then we target for reconciliation. Quite regularly in the source systems have been around for a while, and people create similar columns or similar information which are almost duplicates in the nature, and we look forward to consolidate those. So as you can see, about 35% of the existing footprint gets reduced and reconciled in that process. So what you're really aiming for to move forward or migrate is actually almost 60% of what you have today. In that 60%, we further look to refactor so that your actual labor or actual modernization effort from the legacy is much more agile, simpler version of what you have today. Just by doing this one step, what you really gain is significant, not only cost savings, but also timeline predictability, and put in a game plan where you can establish a hybrid team to tackle. It's very common that we see teams are very comfortable in the modern platforms, but they have tech debt or around the legacy platforms. And that is another reason why establishing that planning investment upfront helps a lot in identifying the migration candidates. Usually, we put a chart like this where you can think about defining waves in your journey where you're going from different work streams between reduce, reconcile, refactor, reimagine, to eliminate, consolidate, migrate, modernize in that process. As you can see, the actual heavy workload starts from work stream 3 or 4 onwards, which means you have enough knowledge of what you're migrating upfront in the first 2 quarters while you are reconciling and reducing the existing footprint, which actually builds momentum to the program and delivers significant cost savings. Then comes the approach itself. If you are looking at how do you really map out these components when we dissect it. So we are giving you a view of how to map out your existing footprint into different layers. Reporting layer, dimension layer, logical layer, physical layer. This is a very standardized framework to identify your existing components across these layers and target map it to other platforms. In fact, this is a representative view, so don't take this as it is. You may decide to redefine this to your situation as a target state, which is completely fine. And also, when you think about your own specific business needs, a lot of specificity emerges from there. But if you keep a pure play Tableau stack as your destination, this is what you see there. Dashboard, web editing capability, prep flow, hyperfiles, all of that is part of the Tableau capability in itself. As we speak, a semantic layer is emerging in the Tableau ecosystem in the form of data cloud. That is an interesting product or technology to consider when you think about defining that semantic layer. We can target map any legacy platform in this fashion to understand the footprint and how that maps to the modern infrastructure.
So there we have a few questions here. Let me know when you're ready. We can get started here.
Yes,
Yep,
so
I
can definitely take the questions while I
Great. I can go ahead and start asking those for you in the order you received them. The first one is, as a BI vendor, does Salesforce Tableau assist with our migration planning and decisioning? Arun, do you want to take that one?
I can take that. So I think there's a number of things that you can do. One is we have a customer workshop for migration and modernization. You can reach out to your account executive to really have a conversation around how do you leverage this customer workshop. It's some of you have gone through Tableau days, for example. It's very similar to this. We work with you, and we bring in our partners like USEReady to really have an assessment of your current state, environment, and then we have a couple-hour session where we really talk about identifying those complexities and really creating the path forward. So that's number one. Number two, which we're going to talk a little bit about, there is a session at Dreamforce that we are doing really specifically on this topic to bring spotlight to this. So just want to bring these two things. So there, you have anything else to add on this?
So first of all, it is valuable to start with a path of discovery where I have had the pleasure of. So we highly recommend that approach that Arun was talking about in the decision process to begin with. And jointly, we have done several exercises where we were able to understand and assess the environments and come to this state. Basically, what we are talking about is being able to establish this approach and the map in that journey, in the decision process. This is something that we can produce as an artifact as part of that journey is what I was trying to add on to that. So if I may continue along and then take the questions. So the key aspect, what we are trying to establish in the strategy and the blueprint is having these components of a legacy platform mapped out to a target platform really goes a long way to understand the journey. One of the modern stack components is described here with a combination of our Tableau extensions and the new products from Tableau, that is Pulse, data semantic layer, which I was talking about earlier, and embedding analytics. We are able to produce a transformation that is, whether it's at your consumption layer to the end users or internal optimization, we can actually design that through the workshop that Arun was talking about.
Yeah. So one thing that we often talk about here is identifying duplicate functions, whether that is SQL or formulas or calculated fields. And there's some best practices and success stories here, right? Could you talk a little bit about it? What are the recommendations? How should one go about it? And then we should also talk about, folks here have, hundreds of, analytics content, whether that is reports or dashboards. In some cases, there's thousands of it. So how should one test this, right, once they migrate? So as there's two elements of it, identification and testing process. So let's deliberate on it. I think it kind of plays into the planning and decision-making process.
Great. Actually, that perfectly dovetails into this point where we can do that with a success story as an example, right? Take, for example, this environment, this customer of ours who was embarking on close to 700 reports across different departments. What made this more complex is not the volume of the report in itself, but actually the variety. As you can notice, there were like 6 different BI platforms coming together or being in deployment, serving 700 reports, which you can imagine is a lot of cost or expense drain because of the need to manage different teams for each platform. So the path forward from a situation like that started back into that 3-step process we talked earlier. That is deduplication first using the plan module. What happened here is that we developed a source inventory collection upfront, established source complexity assessment and scoring, deduplication and clustering through applying extracted metadata, and ultimately doing statistical logic analysis like clustering or regression on top of that. We're able to identify eliminating, deduplicating in that module across these platforms. We standardized on target metadata from these platforms, and which is what leads us to the next step, that is migrate. As you can imagine, in that first step alone, the elimination was significant for them, which resulted in a much smaller footprint to migrate. Then comes the validation logic you're talking about, Arun, is that how do we really validate BI artifacts where by applying AI techniques, computer vision, we were able to really build and establish before and after view of each dashboard, each reporting layer, and then target tracking that to benchmark, okay, did we migrate this? Do the numbers look right? So automation, investing in that automation during validation phase helps a lot. This alone, combined strategy of plan, migrate, validate, helped us to achieve not only high volume of proper translation into the target platform, and also timeliness, because a lot of that was predictable. And that is an example I wanted to share with you in that context. Does that resonate with what you're saying, Arun, earlier? So
yeah, absolutely. So I think I really wanted to tee up this conversation here, right? Migration is not just, plain old lift and shift. There's some thoughtfulness that is required here, not just in terms of planning for it, but also validating for it. And how do we leverage some of the modern tools like computer vision, for example, to really identify and test, because it's not humanly possible to, look through all the hundreds of, if not thousands of analytics content here. So that's the lens that I wanted to bring in and have a conversation. Back to you, Megan. Are there any other questions that we have that we need to address?
Yep, we sure do. So the second question we got is, if we are doing both data and BI migration, how should we think about our priorities?
Yeah, I can take that, and Uday, feel free to add your thoughts into it. I think this is a very interesting conversation that we often get into with our customers. Both have its merits, data migration as well as BI migration. The root of the question lies on, where do you find the most ROI? As you know, we are in an economy where everything, every decision that we make, there is an ROI associated with it. Would you get a higher level of ROI if you provide your decision makers, your stakeholders, a platform to do their jobs better, to make decisions better? So I believe that analytics is, although it's more complicated than data, is where the ROI lies the most. So Uday, do you have an opinion here? Passing the mic over to you.
Absolutely. So it's actually very interesting. A lot of customers we see have a similar pattern. They embark on data journey, whether it's migrating from on-prem to cloud or optimizing, improving, upgrading, whatnot, then try to blend in. And the BI becomes quite often afterthought due to burdened budgets and whatnot, which further accentuates the problem from a user perspective. End users ultimately see the value when the impact is visible on their day-to-day journey. And that's where, as Arun was mentioning, ROI in BI migration is much higher. I would almost argue reverse the process. Although it may be, for some cases, it may be late already. But if you think about creating the impact, start with the user first. And modern platforms like Tableau offer you that flexibility, because you can actually have that, build a semantic layer to serve off of, and first tackle end user layer and then go back end to transforming your data layer. Because BI layer is where you will decide what data do you really need. It's not the other way around. So
yeah, and I think, Uday, there is another aspect to this conversation, that is the experience first mindset when it comes to analytics. What experience are you delivering to your stakeholders? As I mentioned before, jobs to be done, decisions to be made. For example, for a teller or a banker or a customer service agent or an airline, mechanic. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? The spectrum of folks who needs data is not just analysts anymore. It's just a larger population here. So let's start off with the decisions to be made, jobs to be done, and then let's work backwards from there into what analytics experiences are we serving to these people. Some may just need a set of narrative experiences. Some may need much deeper exploratory data experience. There's different tools to do this. And then let's talk about the metrics, the insights that this is going to be based on. Then content. And then, so if we work backwards from the experiences to use cases, and by the way, loosely speaking, the experiences to use cases is a 1-to-many ratio. Underneath each experience, there are many use cases. So let's talk about this, and then let's work backwards. That really creates an ROI, an impact-oriented analytics lens. So we're deliberately going away from creating hundreds of thousands of reports or tens of hundreds of reports to more of a tailored experience-centric environment where we are helping our decision makers make better decisions, because that's why we have data, right? We want to make better decisions in our lives, and that has a much more ROI-centric lens. It also creates a lens of higher level of adoption and data culture, right? I mean, all these things started 6-7 years back when people started talking about data culture. This is the true essence of data culture. Back to you there.
Thank you. We can take the next question.
Excellent. We have 2 more, unless anyone has anything else to drop in. Third question we have is, how do we know which artifacts to eliminate or reduce from existing BI environment?
So I can start this one. Let's say we have a BI environment that is a black box to you. And it is not as uncommon as you might think, actually. It's actually very common. The key problem here is that a lot of legacy BI platforms are built with a very proprietary approach. If you actually look at it from the lens of how technology evolution happened in our industry, it almost traces that back. The more legacy your platform is, it's probably the first generation from client-server architecture to later more modern approach. So based on that, so what we invested in is building those source connectors to extract the metadata. So that's what we would aim for. So look for that metadata that you want to pull out of there and leverage accelerators to get that information out before you start taking report and deploying a lot of humans to scrape the data out. It might require, we have standardized on quite a few, but if you have something really special, we might want to take it as an offline question, but we can certainly look at based on the platform you have and what is the right kind of extraction logic that we need to deploy there. Once you have that, that's when the elimination process, which we talked about earlier, also identifying redundancy using statistical technique on the data source is how we would approach it. Around your thoughts.
Yeah, so let's take the most widely used analytics assets in a bank, that is the branch performance scorecard. And I mean, if you look at the scorecard, I've seen several scorecards, some done really well, some has lots of legacy content. As these contents age and evolve, people add additional filters, additional visuals to this, analytics visuals to it, and it creates a sort of clunky experience, wherein as a teller, as a banker, it's just really hard for me to even consume it, and let alone making decisions. So going back to my experience first mindset, so if you look at this, how do you think about migrating something like this? Should we just plainly lift and shift and move to Tableau? That's going to really defeat the purpose. So let's identify duplication. Let's identify UX challenges with it. Take this opportunity to reimagine it using new analytics techniques that's available in the platform. So that's one lens. The second lens is the interesting usage of semantics layer. While thinking about migration, let's also examine the semantics. Tableau's pretty rich, and we're doing a lot of innovation in this space with Data Cloud, with new semantics layer capabilities that are coming in. So how do we leverage some of those capabilities? So we're not only just tackling the analytics content, we're also tackling the infrastructure behind it. And so I think there needs to be a focus on content there also needs to be a focus on infrastructure. And then the third leg of the stool is the notion of operating model and governance. This is a great time. We're going to be retiring a lot of eliminating a lot of content, retiring, or whatever is the right word for it. Let's also visit the operating model here, right? What kind of operating model you want to have, and then I think a lot of us kind of have grown up in this centralized or decentralized model. So different models works for different people. So in the new world, how do you want to think about this? So these are some great ways to eliminate, identify which assets, which artifacts to retire. How do you want to think about your architecture? How do you want to think about your operating processes, and then move forward in the new world? And all these actually creates a great foundation for embracing AI, for embracing the new set of AI tools. So I think we're not just doing this migration for the sake of migration. We're doing it for ROI. We're doing it for modernization. So I think one should leverage this opportunity to bring all these new capabilities into the platform.
Thanks, Arun. We have time for one last question, and it is, what is the relevance of the Migrator IQ? Is it a tool or a product?
Oh, I'll take that. So it's actually a concept that we developed as part of our blueprint to make the community think about this journey of BI migration as a program with some framework and accelerators. And it helped us to sort of codify things and the steps in the process in a much better way than we could have articulated. So it's actually not a product. It's not a platform. It's not a software. It's actually a set of things. It's a blueprint that you can take and deploy to all BI migration scenarios. We're extending the thoughts around it, but basically it's designed for how to think about BI migration in general and specifically targeting to your environment.
Well, thank you both, Uday and Arun, for leading this session, our Tableau Summer Skills first session. So everyone, be sure to look out for a PDF of the PowerPoint if you do want to relook over any assets. We will also be sending through some more information, including information how to meet up with everyone at Dreamforce. I'm also going to be sending you a special discount code so that you can join Uday and Arun in person in San Francisco. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Arun.
Thank you. Bye.